house. And we are going to have a somber reflection on history that we cannot forget. We know we're in a day and age where they are trying to erase our history by removing it out of textbooks, by banning the books that we know that we need to read to keep our eyes open and ensure that this country always remains accountable to a people that helped to build it. And so it's my honor today to introduce to you all this event, Burning Truth, the Tulsa Race Massacre Until Echoes of Justice. Before we start our panel today, hi friends, we can hear you pretty loud and clear. Before we start our panel today, we will be watching a mini documentary entitled Tulsa Still Burning. So I want, friend, he on the phone, he don't give me care. You just a little loud. That's all. I was just saying we can hear you. That's all. Yes. Hi, I'm Angela Rye, by the way. I am the same off air and on air. And I am very, very deeply protective of my extended family. Demario Solomon Simmons, who has been the attorney for the Tulsa Race Massacre survivors and their descendants. If we can give him a round of applause. Wave, Demario. And my dear sister, Tiffany Crutcher, and you will meet the rest of the panel after this documentary. But that's why I did that, brother. It's all love, but you would get in trouble at church, too. So let the church say amen and let us watch the film.
I'm attorney Demario Solomon Simmons. Law is my ministry, justice is my passion. And I've been working on trying to get justice and reparations for the massacre for over 25 years now.
Joining me now is Demario Solomon Simmons, attorney.
One of the things that I really enjoy about being a lawyer is you get to fight. You can fight one or two ways. One of the things, fight with the physical violence, or you can fight with your words and what you write.
As far as a legal narrative is concerned, is as long as you use the term mob, you have an image that the guilty can hide behind. Now, if I say, like Demario is saying in the Justice for Greenwood lawsuit, that the city of Tulsa destroyed Greenwood, that changes the language significantly, because until you name names, you're not going to really create any change, because there were people who were benefactors of this event. But if you name it, then you set the grounds for a legal fight that you actually have a potential to win.
My family's been here in Oklahoma since the 1830s. Black Creek Indians came on a Trail of Tears. I grew up here in North Tulsa, went to school right down the street here on Greenwood. Then I went to Booker T. Washington High School. And I went to University of Oklahoma. Creek Indians came on a Trail of Tears. I grew up here in North Tulsa, went to school right down the street here on Greenwood. Then I went to Booker T. Washington High School. And I went to University class when I first really learned about the massacre in Greenwood. I reluctantly raised my hand and said, I'm from North Tulsa and that's not true. And of course I was wrong. And it was such an embarrassing moment to realize that I didn't know my own history of my own community.
People from all over the country would ask, where are you from? And I would say Tulsa, Oklahoma. And people would say Black Wall Street, Tulsa race riot. And I was a bit embarrassed because I had no clue what they were talking about.
Now we call it the massacre, after we've later learned what actually took place.
My grandfather said, have a seat. I survived the massacre. Man, when he told me that, I felt like somebody had just stacked a boulder on my shoulders. How is it I didn't know this?
I said, that's what Aunt Janie would talk about. And we thought Aunt Janie was just nuts, you know. And no, she was traumatized. And if that was my Aunt Janie, I could only imagine all the other survivors.
Oh, my name is, my maiden name is let's see, Benningfield.
You don't look 109.
I don't look 109.
No, ma'am.
I don't?
No.
Well, for goodness sake, thank you.
I'm still amazed. I'm still in shock. I have anger issues at sometimes because I cannot believe what she went through. And it's been swept under the rug like it didn't happen.
So May 30th, Dick Rowland, a young teenage shoeshine boy, went to the Drexel building to use the restroom. It was the only place that a colored person could use the bathroom then. He tripped going into the elevator. Well, Sarah Page screams and word gets out. But the word that gets out is that Dick Rowland had just tried to rape Sarah Page in the elevator in broad daylight on a holiday. Well, later that evening, Dick Rowland is barricaded in the top floor of the courthouse building. About 6,000 angry white men assemble here. An incident happens where a white man fights with a black man over a gun. The gun goes off. All mayhem breaks loose.
When you talk about the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, you're talking about the worst act of domestic terrorism in the history of this country. And it was done by the whole white society. You know, a lot of times we want to say a white mob. No, it was white Tulsa. You're talking about 38 to 40 city blocks burnt down to the ground. 8 to 10,000 people made homeless overnight. 3,000 people dead and or disappeared, never to be heard from again. Over $200 million in property damage destroyed. And when I say that number, that big number, we're talking over 1,500 homes and businesses destroyed. You're talking about people seeing and smelling the flames as they escape for their lives.
So this image is everything. First place in American history where citizens of the United States had bombs dropped on them. My family resided here. That's where my family's property was. It's so profound when you look at the magnitude, one section of the entire district. That's a humongous area, and we're just looking at a quarter of it.
What was my great-grandmother thinking when she had to jump on the back of a truck and barely escape racial terror violence?
You look back behind you, and all of your belongings are being stolen out of your house, taken, and then your house is set on fire.
She said people were shooting at her. She saw people die in front of her.
They saw pure, unadulterated evil.
There was a plan already in place to take the land in Greenwood. None of this is accidental. It's not about Dick Rowland and Sarah Page in the elevator. It was, in fact, an ethnic cleansing to make sure nobody could come back to this area of African descent.
When the National Guard came, they joined in. The general, he wrote in his report, he saw 25,000 whites belligerently and mindlessly destroying everything.
It wasn't just a minor event. This was an attempt at extermination, and we are the voices, we are the survivors of those who are probably fertilizing the soil of these lands with their bones and blood. When you look at this photo, anybody in their right mind would demand justice for Greenwood.
So you are at the historic Vernon AME Church, and we're not just a ordinary church. We are in the middle of historic Greenwood on Black Wall Street. I wanted to help in preserving the history and telling the history, and I just wanted to be a part of this great energy that's in this church. Before the massacre, after the massacre, today, it is still the hub of this community. Okay, so this picture is after the massacre. This is Vernon. This is what survived. This is what we call the basement, a space where a lot of the residents of Greenwood hid during the massacre. And so it's a powerful space, and you can feel it when you walk in here. The Sunday following the massacre, Vernon had church. There was still rubble all around. How do you have the strength to do that.
The big question at this point is, how did all these black people get here to Oklahoma before it became a state? Most people in America have no idea.
Why Greenwood? We got to back up and understand the totality of this story. People were coming here to be free, to own land, to have businesses, and build something for themselves, free of white oppression.
It was a tight-knit community who had shared principles, shared values that they agreed upon, and black people were thriving.
What you have here is literally a city within a city. This is a masterful, self-sustaining community, really beautiful. How many seats do you think are in this theater? And it has a big balcony, everything. 750 seats. The Dreamland Theater sat right here behind me. The people who owned it, John Williams, and that's Lula. Lula was probably one of the wealthiest women in Greenwood.
Dr. A.C. Jackson is one of the most prominent known murder victims of the massacre.
He was recognized as one of the most able black surgeons and physicians in the United States of America, not by Greenwood, but by the Mayo Clinic.
I always think about what would black America be like if the brilliancy of Dr. A.C. Jackson was allowed to continue to flourish. This whole lot used to be the Stratford Hotel. It was the largest African-American owned hotel in the nation. It really struck me. Hotels like Hilton, Hyatt. I said, man, that could have been in Stratford. And what a difference it would have made for black people throughout this nation.
You know, I didn't know I came from greatness. I didn't know I came from black excellence. And so I get a little upset about this conspiracy of silence that sort of reverberated throughout my dad's generation and my generation. I believe that it is our duty to make sure that we right that wrong and that we teach our children and our future generations what happened here so we don't repeat it.
They need to stop trying to keep it out of schools. Everybody needs to learn about it. That's history. That's American history.
They say that history teaches us not to repeat it. But I say history is important for you to learn how to move forward. It connects you to the people. It gives you a standing. I think about the love. That was a community who believed in helping other families stay ground in this land. That building is what they were all about.
This is about 2 years after the massacre. And look at how many tents people are rebuilding on this house. This is what we are. This is what we do. We rebuild in the face of adversity. Took a lot of courage. Mr. Bryant had enough foresight to gather bricks from his burned out building and place them here. That's why you see these bricks here. The fact that somebody had enough forethought to rebuild this in the way that they did was to ensure that we wouldn't suffer from historical amnesia. If there's ever an example of from the ashes, this is it.
And then there's a second massacre that comes through. Urban renewal.
Urban renewal, or what we call Negro removal. And then you see this highway built specifically, intentionally to destroy the remnants of Greenwood and to create a physical barrier between black Tulsa and white Tulsa. It needs to come down because this is a symbol of white supremacy. This is no different than a Confederate monument. When something is put up for the specific purpose of basically imprisoning a community, we shouldn't have to live with these type of remnants.
We feel that urban renewal destroyed Greenwood a second time. And so I often talk about the physical violence that took place back in 1921, and decades later, the policy violence came through and destroyed it yet again. And that is what we're dealing with right now with the gentrification.
When I was a child, there were still 169 businesses black-owned in the Greenwood district. That would only last a few years because they would eventually all be torn down.
All this development, the restaurants, the banks, the hotels, the office buildings, they're not owned by black people. And more importantly, it's not owned by the original inhabitants of Greenwood. What does it mean for a person like Mother Randall, who suffered the massacre, and then in 1980, they took her home and moved her out in deep North Tulsa. And her property, her family had owned for 70 years. It's now just some white-owned business.
We have to really recognize not just what happened here, but what's still happening here, because we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't still happening. Greenwood is still burning. And people ask, what does that mean? It means that until you put the fire out, it's still burning.
In your life in Tulsa, what do you think has changed?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a great big change.
Don't.
That's the best answer I can give you.
When I think about what happened 100 years ago, I have to fast forward to 2016 when my twin brother Terrence Crutcher was killed with his hands in the air at the hands of the same police department that deputized Klansmen. The parallels are so stark. So much has changed, yet so much has stayed the same. There's been no solace. There's been no repair, no restitution.
We have not got an ounce of justice, not from this city, not at all. It's hard to gravitate to what we've been through.
2017, as we were getting closer to the centennial, the city of Tulsa was really trying to clean up their image. They knew the world was going to be watching, and they started trying to put forth this false narrative of Tulsa triumphs. We've come so far since the massacre. And it really was infuriating me. So I started thinking, what can we do here? We really didn't know if there's any legal path, but I was like, we got to do something. Mayor Bynum had quoted on numerous occasions that the massacre was the reason for the inequalities in Tulsa today. And then we take those statements and we put them in our litigation. It shocked the whole world. Once we realized we have a real, valid, live case.
The quest for justice has been left to the three known survivors. That's Hughes Van Ellis, Leslie Benningfield Randall, and Viola Ford Fletcher.
Things haven't been the same ever since we filed that lawsuit.
Today I'm visiting Washington, D.C. for the first time in my life. I'm here seeking justice, and I'm asking my country to acknowledge what happened in Tulsa in 1921.
I still see it today in my mind 100 years later. We aren't just black and white pictures on a screen. We are flesh and blood. I was there when it happened. I'm still here. Justice will be served.
We had our first ever hearing over 100 years on this issue in the Tulsa County District Courts. All three of the survivors were there. And then we had our second hearing. It was the most people, I think, in the history of Tulsa to ever go and watch a court hearing. It was so amazing. It was the first time that a court had even given us anything to vindicate these people. Now we're in 2023. I said, Mother Fletcher is with us today. Today is her 109th birthday. And now, 102 years later, she's here in this court, still asking for justice. So fast forward, I get a call from a reporter asking me, do I care to comment on my case being dismissed? I could not believe it. It was just the most devastating thing It was also amazing because Uncle Red said, "Can we appeal?"
We're not through yet.
That's right.
We just started.
That's right, Uncle Red. I said, absolutely. I said, we're definitely going to appeal.
And Uncle Red, you told me earlier before this interview began, you're going to fight until you get justice.
That's right. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm
Amen.
still here.
Amen.
I'm here to fight.
Thank you. Keep fighting. You said if it takes 28 years, Uncle Red.
28 years, I'm here.
You know, Uncle Red, you know, he passed in October. He really, really wanted to see justice before he passed away, and we really wanted to make that happen. So we had a press conference over at Vernon AME. I said, listen, we've been here before. It's unfortunate that we continue to hit these roadblocks, but I said, well, if B.C. Franklin can be practicing law days after the massacre in the tent, suing the very people, but not just the very entities, but the very people that burned down the community, then damn it, we're going to keep fighting all the way. And so we filed our appeal. They retained the case, so that was huge, huge victory.
These plaintiffs have been waiting for almost 103 years for their opportunity to be in court to prove what happened to them and their community. We're just simply asking that this court give us the opportunity to be remanded back to the district court to prove our claims. We look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This week, after years of fighting for justice, the Oklahoma Supreme Court dismissed the lawsuit brought seeking reparations. The justice's ruling said the lingering impact of the massacre does not fall within the scope of our state's public nuisance statute.
Yes, it's a very, very difficult week for us to get this unbelievable, unjust decision.
It does feel like the state of Oklahoma is just trying to run out the clock because of their age.
No question about it. We've had all type of unnecessary delays by the state. We're just so disheartened that the Supreme Court ruled against us without even actually dealing with the facts that we put forward. Each and every time, the courts have utilized whatever they need to kick us out. And it's shameful, and I'm very ashamed of my city of Tulsa. And we believe that the Oklahoma Supreme Court, not only did they get it wrong on the ultimate decision, but they did not follow the law. And so we are planning to file for a petition for rehearing. This is not the end, Reverend Al. I want to let everyone know that this is not the end. We're going to explain to them how they got this wrong. In addition to that, we are calling upon the United States Department of Justice to open a federal criminal investigation into the massacre. It has never happened. They have the ability to do it, and we need the Biden-Harris administration to step in and provide some justice to our survivors. That they care about these survivors' pain, and they care about Black America's collective pain by having such an open wound not be rectified. They're not fair for this country.
I want City of Tulsa to stop banking on what they went through.
This was the whole charade that the city and the powers that be were playing. Oh, we're so happy to be in Greenwood. Yeah, you're happy now because you own it. Yes, you want tourism to come to Greenwood because it's going to benefit you. It does not benefit Black people. All the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the people on this wall and the thousands of others that suffered the massacre, they deserve the first slice of any revenue that comes in to this city.
You took it, you still have it, give it back.
You say it happened, you know, but you're constantly putting money back into your pockets. That's not right. How's that justice for the survivors and what they went through?
Acknowledging but not actually fixing it is the epitome of white supremacy. Because now you say, you see my humanity, and you're telling me I don't give a damn. So justice looks like acknowledgement plus tangible action. The tangible action that the victims say, this is what we need to be made whole.
That is reparations.
Justice would be reparations for the survivors who are living at 109 and their descendants. Justice would be land reclamation. Justice would be scholarships for descendants.
Put it in a trust for these kids where they can go to college and then bring it back to North Tulsa and build North Tulsa. The same stuff that's out south needs to be out north. We shouldn't have to travel miles to get to a hospital.
Greenwood had a hospital at the time of the massacre. North Tulsa does not have a hospital. And black Tulsans live 11 to 14 years less than white Tulsans because we don't have access to adequate health care. I want to see the Dr. A.C. Jackson Memorial Hospital. Mental health care for survivors and descendants.
Generational trauma has reverberated through our family's history.
Those who suffered the massacre have not received anything, but they've had to actually pay taxes to the very entities that destroyed everything. So there should be tax abatement for a minimum of 100 years.
Justice would be Terrence being alive, but justice would be that this never happened.
You can't make nobody learn nothing, but you can teach them. And eventually, if they have any right thing in their heart, it will come to pass. And now if we all do that, we have a different world.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a different world.
Oh man, Mother Randall, I mean, obviously I love all of my clients. But Mother Randall is so special to me because, first of all, she's the named plaintiff. If no Mother Randall, there's no case. And she shows up at every hearing. She's 109 years old.
You remember who DeMario is?
DeMario?
Yes.
I really like the guy. I think he's really...
I love her. I love being her lawyer.
I don't know how in the world he carries these fights with him on his shoulders, but he's doing it. He's doing it. And this community loves him.
DeMario has stuck with us from day one through the good, bad, and ugly. I tell DeMario that his work, our work, will go down in Oklahoma history books.
I'm just standing on the shoulders of the B.C. Franklins. I'm just standing on the shoulders of the Amos T. Halls, the Jim Goodwins, Don Rawls, Maxine Horner, and the Charles Ogletrees, and so many other people. And that's the work of Justice for Greenwood. That's the work of being in the community.
This is not a matter of past trauma. It is concurrent.
And we will not rest until justice comes.
When we win, what I want to see is the community feel a victory. It's like we're seen for once. We're seen. Not have to continue to fight on this one issue.
They really want to see justice. They want to have their day in court. I want her to be able to tell her story in front of the whole world. The evidence is out there. We're saying something. Now do something about it. Give them the justice they deserve.
I knew a lot of people on this wall. They were my clients. All these people on the wall are dead. They all died without any justice. And so that's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you moving forward.
We can't do this work alone. We have to build power. We're building a movement ecosystem.
It's not just the litigation. It's the education. It's the organization. It's the galvanizing and mobilizing the community.
We are trying to disrupt systemic oppression, systemic racism, and we want to build it back up with something bigger, better, and more beautiful. That is Greenwood. That is who we are. We are the greatest love story that this state has ever known.
As long as there are survivors or descendants here, as long as we continue to tell this story, we're going to continue to agitate, continue to push for justice and reparations. Justice for Greenwood! Justice for Greenwood! Justice for Greenwood!
We need the front lights on too. Thank you all so much for being here. What a somber film. It's so important that we are in this space that we're in. Here in Chicago, during the Democratic National Convention to have this conversation. So I'd like to welcome the panelists to the stage, and I'm going to start with my dear brother, Demario Solomon Simmons, who, as you all saw, is not just the star of this film in so many ways, but he is an advocate, an agitator when he needs to be, and a fighter, activist for justice for all of us, and Greenwood has been one of his most primary causes. So Dee, if you join us. And before I continue introducing the panelists, one thing that I have to do, I am a former staffer for the Congressional Black Caucus, and one of our members has joined us, Congressman Al Green. If you could wave to everyone, representing the great city of Houston, Texas. That'd be Congressman. I don't know if you wanted to make remarks. Do you want to make any remarks? Oh, of course, of course. And we also have Chris Benson, who's the president of the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley Institute, joining us. I'll move this way. I'll move this way. There we go. And last but certainly not least, we have Reverend Wheeler Parker Jr., the cousin of Emmett Till. You know, I want to start not with the film, but with something that you and I talk about all the time. I want to tell you all, Demario, sometimes I call D is less syllables. I've known him since we were in law school. And I'm bringing that up to you all because we met in the National Black Law Students Association, and Demario was our reparations chair. Y'all, somebody snickered because they know, like, nothing has changed. This has been the greatest fight of his life. And I want to start there because it's kind of funny because you're so remarkably consistent. But it's kind of not funny because you want to tell him when he graduated before me, but I graduated in 2005. So the fact that it's 2024 and this is still the greatest fight of his life is actually no laughing matter at all. Can you please tell us why and what drives you, not just for reparations that we deserve from the transatlantic slave trade, reparations in Tulsa, reparations for every injustice that this country has ever put on the shoulders and the backs of black folks?
Well, good afternoon. I must tell you that film I've seen it obviously so many times, and it's always so emotional. It's so good to be here with you, so good to be here with you, Angela. I also want to thank the representative for coming out. I want to recognize Uncle Red, who you saw in the film, who's passed. His daughter, Muriel Watson, is here. I definitely want to recognize her. And then my dear sister, Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, who's also in the film, who's a descendant. She's here also. You know, it's a great pleasure and honor to be on this stage and be partnered with the Emmett Till Institute. And when you talk about what drives the work, you think about what happened to Emmett Till in 1954 and the courage and the strength of his mother to open that casket and say, okay, I'm going to lean into this fight as a mother burying her daughter. And I think about those type of things because I grew up a lot with my grandparents who were sharecroppers, who dealt with Jim Crowism, my grandfather was a trash man, and after he got off work, he had to work at a bank, and then he had to come home and stay up all night with his shotgun to protect my family because they were the first black family on their block. And so I also come from, that's on my mother's side. On my father's side, I'm a Black Creek Indian, and my ancestor came on the Trail of Tears, and he fought for the freedom of enslaved Black Creeks and signed the Treaty of 1866. So this is in my blood. But I think when I learned about Greenwood, it was not going to school on Greenwood. It was when I went to the University of Oklahoma playing football, and I learned about it in class, and then someone was telling me about my own history, my own community, and I didn't believe it. And when I found out, I was so embarrassed. It just struck something in me that I had a calling to educate others and advocate, because I understood then that not only was it important for my community, but justice for Greenwood is justice for black people. Because what was taken from us as a community, a national community, just like with Emmett Till, that struck a chord in us. Because just like at Emmett Till, this can happen to a wonderful young man to be brutalized in this manner and nothing happens. If a whole community of 40 blocks, this is 10,000, 12,000 people, can be destroyed, $200 million in property damage, over 3,000 people disappear, and nothing, no accountability, none of us are safe. And so that just drives me. And then obviously my clients, and just, I was so fortunate to be a clerk with Charles Ogletree, Professor Ogletree, and work with Johnny Cochran, and be a young lawyer carrying their briefcases. And to see the commitment that they had, it just makes me want to continue to move forward. And I'm committed to making sure that at least our last two survivors see some form of justice, and that's why we're calling upon the Biden-Harris administration to do what they can in this very moment. And thank you so much all for being here to support us.
Thank you so much, Dee. I really appreciate that. I do have a quick follow-up, and then I do want to get to both of you. We are here, and I think there are some folks who they watched you in the film, they've heard you speak, and you are constantly applying pressure to the Biden-Harris administration. There are many members in our community, and I know Tiffany knows this well, where folks will say, "No, you can't challenge them like that. You got to be quiet. They're on our side." But what demonstrates to this administration or any other Democratic administration or progressive administration that they're on our side is for them to do things that demonstrate that they are on our side. So we've seen and heard about all the accomplishments we certainly did in President Biden's speech on Monday night. I'd like to hear what your expectation is clearly, and what this room can do to support that expectation before President Biden steps away.
Absolutely. Well, there's two things that can be done, and you can help it. Number one, the Department of Justice can open a criminal investigation pursuant to the Emmett Till Cold Case Act of 2008, which was reauthorized in 2016. This is why we're partnered with the Emmett Till Institute, and so thankful to have the support of the Emmett Till family. This is a law that was passed specifically to investigate civil rights violations and crimes that occurred between 1920 and 1970. The Tulsa Race Massacre was in 1921. And some people, we've had many meetings with the DOJ. We've had discussions with them. Angela's participated in that. And sometimes people want to talk about, I know Chris is going to talk about this even more, well, is anyone to prosecute? But as Chris knows, and he's going to explain because he was a part of making that act happen, the primary purpose of the act is what, Chris?
To provide information.
To investigate.
So certainly, just to pick up on that, DeMario and I joked when we sat down, it was appropriate for us to be next to each other because this is the law firm of DeMario and Chris. But the point is that ordinarily in a criminal investigation, the government will only proceed if it knows it can convict somebody or has some reasonable expectation that somebody's going to be convicted. So this was extraordinary because one of the chief purposes of the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act is to also clear the record, to provide information to help in the reconciliation, in the effort to repair the damage, because there's ongoing, enduring, traumatic memory, not only for the families of the immediate victims, but for the entire community, because you expect that this could happen to you at any time, and that's the nature of ethno-violence. We're transforming from calling it hate crime to ethno-violence now because it's all political, and we see that. It's all about power. So we say that the Emmett Till story is about more than Emmett Till. it's about more than racial violence. It's about power, right? The power to put people in a certain place in our society and to enforce that through violent means, as we see with the Tulsa case. So we're supporting the organization in trying to get the Justice Department involved, as they were in the Till case. And Reverend Parker and I can talk about that too, but to get them involved in at least investigating whether there are some people who can still be brought to justice under federal legislation, the federal authority, or whether we can at least have some answers to the unanswered questions, and that's important too. And that was threaded through the documentary, which was really, really powerful, that there is some element of justice that comes with knowing the truth, and that's something that we're striving to achieve as well.
Yeah, I want to add to that there is someone that can be held accountable. It's called the City of Tulsa. It is a municipal corporation, and in Oklahoma, corporations are people, as Mitt Romney told us. And the Supreme Court has stated, so they can be held accountable. There are other entities that are still around, insurance companies, banks, and other private entities like the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce that not only participated in the massacre, but also set up what they called at the time, not my words, concentration camps, and caused our people to have to work as slaves, enslaved people, clean up their own community. They could not even get out of the camp unless they had a white person sign them out and they wore a green badge. These things can be investigated, and those charges can bring us some clarity, because we still only know about 10% of what happened during the massacre. I found out last night that Jamie Harrison, Democratic chairperson, his wife is a descendant of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And he told me her grandfather had to flee, and he was so afraid he changed his name. And this happens to so many families across this country, and that's what a federal investigation can help unearth.
You know, one of the things, sorry, my mic is on now. One of the things that I think is so important for you all to understand, we're all at the convention, so we probably have a good handle on this, but policy normally shouldn't change without the influence of people and telling those stories. And one of those things, Reverend Parker, is you actually have experienced your cousin, Emmett Till. You knew who he was, what he meant to your family, and it took you a while to decide to really tell your story. What made you come forth?
Wow, it's been 69 years, and I'm 85, and you asked me to remember. Oh my goodness. I had to, from the very beginning, when it happened, the Look magazine article was so devastating and hurting to me that I still hurt from it. They portrayed Emmett in such a negative way, as he got what he deserved. So he stood up to "I'm not afraid of you" and all that. And I have had to live with that and tried to tell it the best I can. But you feel so helpless because you don't have the media, you have no one to speak for you, you have no one to try to change that. And it was like that for about 30 years. I was interviewed 30 years later. Got a little chance to express it. And even now, when I tell my story, they say I alleged. But I'm the only eyewitness. But the people who told the story, they're believable. And mine, sometimes believable, not believable. But anyway, to write the book, I had a cousin, and she just insisted that she was the first black combat pilot in Afghanistan. And every time she saw me, she just worried me to no end. I got tired of seeing her come, but eventually, I guess I was supposed to do it, and I started writing. My wife was writing the book, and then we brought Chris in, so, and we have nominated him and ordained him to carry it on. I only have a few more years left. At 85, you know you don't have that many years left.
If you are like the Tulsa Race Massacre survivors, we're going to keep you around. They keep you around.
My doctor said he's going to give me 15 more years, but I tried to die a few months ago, and God wouldn't take me, and now I'm healed enough. I can't believe I'm back as well as I am, but I congested heart failure, but I'm really healing, and thank you for your prayers. But anyway, we have a lot of work to do. And I guess something about when you get a certain age, you're okay with going to be with God, you know. My doctor said, "I know why you want to die." I said, "Why?" "You know where you're going." So there's a difference. Time brings about a what? Change. So you have to get 85 to know what I'm talking about. So I think I hope to give you some sense of why I told the story, but let me tell you, I should say this. For 30 years, the attitude of America was that Emmett got what he deserved, so we couldn't talk about it. Black people say it wouldn't have happened in our family. We'd have done something. So there was no space for me to really talk about it. And they said, you should have done something. A little boy told me, said, you should have been behind the door with a broom or something. One kid said, you should have took a bullet. So I didn't take a bullet. I needed you to take the bullet. But that's what we had to have lived with. To see and to hear what's going on now, it's hard for me to believe that America has changed. We come a long way. We got a lot of work to do. But to come to where we are now, to even investigate it, he talked about the laws that they made to pursue cases. It's mind-boggling to me. In the anti-lynching bill, I've seen a lot of change, but we got a lot of work to do. See, I knew when the time, if you didn't live, and most black people do not know our stories, we don't tell them. They tried to stop the Jews from telling theirs, so we're going to tell them until we can't tell it anymore. 500 blacks hung in Mississippi. You can't show me a family, one of those families, of those people that were hung, because we don't talk it. Very quiet about it. So our children don't know the price we paid. They do not know what we've gone through. They know there's racism, know there's segregation, they know little about it, but they don't know the stories because we won't tell them. So we're going to have to start telling it more. We said we get angry, we said we get upset, but we got to tell it without any animosity, ill will, or hate. You got to have a purpose and be positive and have a life. We got to tell the story. I don't know what's going to help us to tell it. I feel if the church don't take a part, it won't be done. But we as preachers, and they don't like for me to say that, we got to do a better job than what we're doing. Got to put down some of those slick riding cars and clothes we wearing. Hope ain't no preachers in the house.
But,
I get lynched there. I'll get the rope.
It's important to hear, survivors talk because we tend to focus on, the immediate victim of a crime. But there are people who survive and either have survivor's guilt or some sense of responsibility for not stepping up or doing something and feeling that there was something they could have done to make a difference. And we have to recognize that as well. How do you make up for the crimes that are committed? And we've heard that in the documentary, right? What does justice mean in these situations? Part of it is the truth, but how do you really make up for a horrible lynching as you saw in the case of Emmett Till, right? The justice in that case would have been Emmett Till coming home,
that's right,
alive and intact, right? So we'll never see justice, not in a criminal justice sense, but there is another level of justice that I think we need to achieve, and thank goodness you're pursuing that as well.
Well, and this I think is the part, right? We have a right to make requests, and we have a right to petition the government for protection where another government or another version of it failed us, whether it's on the local, state, or federal level. And I think one of the things that we're talking about now is it's not just survivors' guilt, but it's also community action. And so the responsibility exists for all of us to play our collective part. So I do think it's important for us to figure out when we now have bills and legislation that's being considered or investigations that we're demanding of this current Justice Department, what does community support look like? What does community action look like? These are the folks who sign petitions and who write their members of Congress and call the offices and tell them, hey, there's something you need to do. Tiffany, for example, earlier before we started said, we have a general election coming up in Tulsa on August 27th. We are electing a new mayor. Well, the current mayor has been an obstructionist for this cause.
That's right.
Demario, I think you should talk a little bit about the current mayor and what you're hoping to see change after August 27th.
Absolutely. And you're talking about petitioning the government. One thing that people from Greenwood has wanted for the last 103 years is to be compensated and repaired. We still have hundreds of outstanding insurance claims in the tens of millions of dollars. We have people that wanted to have compensation. This is something that the state even said to do, and the mayor of Tulsa, Mayor G.T. Bynum, has been very, very clear that he's against any cash compensation. So once you say that, then you're telling us that you're against us. You're against survivors. You're against the community healing. And their latest whitewashing, because they've been doing this for the last 4 or 5 years, is they put together some type of quote-unquote reparations commission. That is not a reparations commission. What the commission is supposed to do is to provide a recommendation of housing equity. And they went out and said publicly, this is going to benefit survivors. So the survivors' families were calling me saying, oh, how's this going to benefit us? And I actually had a meeting with the representatives. Hey, how's this going to benefit the actual survivors and descendants? Oh, well, we really don't know. We was hoping to talk. So I'm had to tell my survivors, I'm sorry you saw this on TV, but this is not actually going to benefit you. And one of the survivor family members said, this is just another ploy hoping these people will die without seeing justice. And so that's what we're dealing with. And we hope that we will have I'm saying this not as justice for Greenwood, but as Attorney Demario Solomon Simmons, that we will have a new mayor and Monroe Nichols, and hopefully can bring finally some justice through the city of Tulsa. But the second role that the federal government can play is a bill. And I'm so glad we have Representative Al Green here. We work so closely with our dear friend and mentor, the late, great Sheila Jackson Lee, who passed away last month. It was a huge personal blow and a huge blow for our national community because he was a fierce advocate to help push things along. But we would love to see Congress introduce a bill over this lame duck session, the Biden-Harris administration, to get justice to our 2 living survivors. With the 9/11, there was a commission that people who were survivors and descendants of those received compensation. They didn't have to go through the court system. There was a commission put together through Congress. Also, in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, 168 people were killed. And I was alive. I remember that happened. I was in class in college. Those people were able to receive compensation or reparations or restitution, or whatever you want to call it, again, through legislative acts. They didn't have to go through the court system. The Congress could do that now. That's something that President Biden could push now. And that would be something that will really cement his legacy as a racial justice warrior. He came to Tulsa. Dr. Crutcher brought him down to Tulsa during the centennial. He met with the clients. My client, Muriel Watson, was there. He told the survivors he was going to make sure they see justice. This is his opportunity. We also met with the vice president, the future president, Kamala Harris. We met with her, and she was so gracious, and she met with us and said she would help get justice. And as you said, we're for them, but we need them to do it like that. Do something. That's what Michelle Obama said last night, right? Do something.
Just on this point, do you play football? So you had a coach. Did your coach ever just say, just go out there and just play, it's fine, I'm not going to challenge you, I'm not going to ask you to do anything different, just go because I love you?
No.
Okay. So if a coach can tough love and get you to pivot when you need to pivot to do something different, I know I just use a basketball term, but just roll with me on that.
I'm with you.
Sometimes you just have to challenge folks to see their blind spots. And that's what we're talking about here, right? We know that we couldn't be sitting right by the RNC and having this same conversation. Highly unlikely. Right. But I do want to ask you, Reverend, and you, Chris, when you think about the levels of challenge and push and prying that has to take place to receive reparative justice vis-a-vis payment, but you look at folks who don't look like us, who haven't had that same role, what do you think the distinction is? Why is it so hard to get governments on any level to understand the importance of restitution, of making us whole?
Chris, you want to start?
Okay. Well, first of all, this is where storytelling comes in, and the importance of sharing, the powerful narratives that we started this session with. Because once people understand the injustice that's been done, right-thinking people will start to think about ways to make it right. And so that, I'm a journalist as well as a lawyer. I consider that a high form of advocacy. So my thing is about what journalists tell the truth, regardless of what you've heard about journalism. So we're all about the truth, but the contextual truth, okay? So it's one thing to talk about the facts of Emmett Till, for example. It's another thing to put it in the context of power in America and the enforcement of power by defining us in certain ways, right? Identity is the beginning of it, and identifying people in oppositional ways that justify putting certain people on lower rungs on the power hierarchy, okay? So once you begin to unpack that, and I've seen this with my grad students at Northwestern, once they begin to see what has been done and to contextualize it, they begin to rethink how they're going to go out and tell stories. And the public is the same way. Once they begin to process things in a different way and show that, they've been adding 2 and 2 and getting 5, they'll recalibrate, because people are fundamentally reasonable, I believe. And I've seen this happen. So what we have to do is begin to inform as you're doing, and get people to see that they're invested in a better America, right? In fulfilling the promise of America, a promise that has not been fulfilled up to now. And then we begin to push people to see what their responsibility is. 20 years before I helped Reverend Parker write his book, I worked with Mother Mobley, Mamie Till Mobley, in writing her book. We worked together the last 6 months of her life to make sure her story would outlive her, and in fact it did. So, but the point of that was to show people that we're all responsible for what we have before us, okay? The title of that book is Death of Innocence, and she loved the title because it operates on 3 levels, right? The death of this innocent kid. There's nothing that a 14-year-old kid did at that store. He whistled, it was a prank, that caused him to be brutally lynched as he was. The death of innocence of his mother, and her journey from, being this innocent person to a higher level of consciousness. That's sacrifice of your innocence to understand more deeply. But fundamentally, it's the death of innocence of this country, right? There could no longer be any innocent bystanders. We all had to take responsibility. Anybody who had anything to do with what had happened, and anybody who stood on the sidelines and allowed it to happen. And once people begin to process that, they step up. So it starts with the vote. That's what we're talking about in this week. It ends with petitioning the government, stepping up to understand that we have that power to make a difference. And those are the kinds of things that we need to incorporate in the stories we tell.
Thank you very much. I think I often think about, especially here lately, at the anti-lynching signing. We were there with Ida B. Wells' great-granddaughter, with her and her brothers the other day, and she made a great speech. I listened to it, and it said it took 100 years. My grandmother was here 100 years ago. It took 200 tries to get an anti-lynching bill from the federal government. I got a little attitude, and I think God just showed me something about America, and you need to know this if you're going to go forward and be successful. The wheels of justice grind, but they grind very slow. It's not going to happen fast, so you got to have that tenacity. You got to stay with it and stick with it until we get it done, and that's what we're doing. We made a lot of progress, and you're going to have diversity all along the way. Diversity has to be there. Emmett Till case, every attorney in Mississippi became a defense attorney. Who's going to prosecute? But there's 2 white guys stood up with the fire in their belly, said, I'll prosecute. And you could see the fear in his eyes. He had the same threats that blacks, he'd have state police at his house, and I met his son. I talked to him now, and he said, my dad did the right thing. So there's always going to be someone there of diversity that's going to be there to fight with you to help you get it changed. But you need to have a lot of patience, go forth without any ill will, animosity, or hate. But you got to stay there. You got to stick with it until it's done.
Thank you, Reverend Parker. We can now take a couple of questions if you all have questions. Okay. All right. You going to come?
First of all, this has been very, very powerful. I want to say hi to my cousin Wheeler.
Surprised to see you. It's a blessing.
Yes. But when we talk about justice, there are a number of ways that you can attain it, right? One of the things that happened in the Emmett Till attempt to get justice was we delivered 300,000 signatures to the Attorney General in Mississippi for the Justice for Emmett Till campaign. We also, some individuals found, along with myself and my daughter and a filmmaker, found the warrant for the arrest for Carolyn Bryant Donham. And that was an attempt to get justice. We in this country had an opportunity to get justice. And in some instances, there are other interests that block those attempts because agendas are put in place in some instances that will create other opportunities and where justice gets derailed. And so I guess I want to talk about that because that did happen. And if anyone would like to address that question about the warrant for the arrest for Carolyn Bryant Donham, which was alive. It was could have been served by the police or the Justice Department, along with the district attorney, along with the sheriff. So 3 people could have been held accountable for pursuing justice. So what happened along the way that derailed it? Because it did get derailed, and we did not get the justice that we could have potentially that we could have achieved. The other thing I do want to ask also, there was an attempt also with the disappointment that you've had with the legal pursuit. How can I say this? Pursuing it on a legal basis takes a lot of courage. You know, it takes a lot of voices, and it takes people believing that something can be done. So those 2 things. One, what is the thing that needs to turn the tide so we believe that justice can be done? And then the other portion of how do things get derailed from justice? What are those things in our community and those other agendas that create the derailment?
So I can take the first part? Okay. So Reverend Parker and I did a 4-year-long ride-along with the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, the District Attorney in Mississippi, and were able to review all the documents that they found, including what you had turned up. And this is Deborah Watts, who's a cousin of Emmett Till and also a delegate. You can see the credentials there from Minnesota. But what we found was that cover-up started back in 1955. So the warrant, which was interesting because we reviewed that as well, the warrant was issued the day after Emmett Till's lynching. So they arrested the husband of Carolyn Bryant and her brother-in-law, and they never arrested her. But in order to have an arrest warrant, you have to have probable cause. So we were searching for what that probable cause was, and it no longer existed. The sheriff at the time basically covered it up. He said he couldn't find her, but she was in court every day of the trial. So he couldn't serve her. But what happened was, whatever the probable cause was at that time that convinced the district attorney at the time to sign the warrant no longer existed. So they could have executed the warrant because under Mississippi law, the warrant stays alive forever. But they would not have had anything to charge her with once they got in there. And so the prosecutor could have been cited for wrongful prosecution if he tried to do that. So it's a real political thing. But ultimately, it comes back to the whole issue of power, right? Because the people who had power back in 1955 started this cover-up, even the trial. The murder trial took place only weeks after Emmett's lynching. Now, you know, attorneys know that it takes a long time to mount a successful criminal trial. I mean, they did it in just a few weeks. It takes longer to build a successful case on Law and Order on TV, okay? So this was a show trial, and we know that. And it was, I mean, global politics were involved. It was the Cold War, and people were struggling for the hearts and minds of this, you know, the global South. So we had to show that we were about justice and to at least pretend to be that. So there was no evidence. that was presented at the time, even though there could have been evidence, and that affected the more contemporary investigation. So it's a tragic thing on top of a tragic situation, but that's what happens. And it goes back to voting rights, right? Because we need to think about electing people. We look at the presidency, we look at Congress. All respect to the congressman who comes in from his hospital bed to cast a deciding vote, but we have to look at local politics as well. School boards, for example, we talk about book banning, we talk about censorship. You know, this is where this stuff happens, and we have to build from the bottom up and get involved in ways that can make a difference.
Man, powerful. To your question on how you keep going, let's be real clear, it's hard. It grinds you down. And I'm so thankful, thank God for my wife, Mia, who's back there, who is a descendant, whose grandmother fled down the tracks at the age of 5 to help sustain me, you know. So I would say this to all of us in this space. Protect your mental health. Get some rest. Try to take vacations. I'm failing on my advice, but, you know, it is difficult. But I think we got to think about what the Reverend said. We got a lot to change, but we've come a long way. Yeah. I mean, our people have suffered and got through so much. And I'll show that picture. When our case was dismissed in July of 2023, we were devastated. But I thought about that photo of B.C. Franklin and his law partner being in a tent filing a lawsuit days after the massacre. And I'm thinking, man, if they could withstand that, I certainly can come to this 5-star hotel and fly around and continue that fight. And then when you look into the eyes of the people we're fighting for, not just the 100-year-old clients, but the 5-year-old nieces and nephews that I mean, I have no choice. And I think we got to keep that in mind, that there is a way for us to win, but we have to continue to push unapologetically. And as Angela said, yeah, we want Kamala Harris, VP, to make it, but we want her to do something for us, tangible, that shows why it's important for us to stand in those hot lines. Our people are going to have to stand in around the country to go against the voter suppression, the violence that's coming over the next 90 days. We got to prepare ourselves for that. They've shown any time that they feel that their power is going to be threatened, they will be violent. Tulsa is the biggest case of that, but that's 1,000 Tulsas. Yeah. But we got to understand our people have been through worse. I see my frat brother, Lee Merritt, National Civil Rights Attorney back there, and we have a saying, see it through. We're facing just what other men have met, other women have met. He talked about Ida B. Wells. I mean, these people were literally running for their lives from lynching. So it's difficult. But as Dr. Curtis tells me sometimes all you have to do is just stand and let God do the work.
Don't give up. Don't get run out.
We are a little over time. You're okay. But I do want to just acknowledge something that you said, Dee, because someone on Kamala's team said to me yesterday they didn't have a choice. And I think that the thing that we got to remember in fights like these, Congressman, you know this all too well, you choose every 2 years to run again and represent your constituents. You are choosing proactively in your power every day to look after Tulsa Race Massacre survivors, descendants, and ensuring that we actually see justice. So we do have a choice. We are choosing in our power to do the right thing. That is our highest honor and our greatest privilege. Might be exhausting. So if you see our dear brother, give him a hug and tell him to keep going. See it through. I ain't no Q, but see it through. Ooh, I got bars today. But the only other thing I would tell you is, in the spirit of Michelle Obama, throwing shade at Donald Trump, it's your black job to do this work. And white folks in here, it's your white job to be an ally of these people doing their black jobs. So, Congressman, if you want to take us out. Yes, indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Congressman Al Green, everyone.
Thank you. I'm standing next to the Reverend because I just celebrated my 25th birthday for the 3rd time. And I have some sense of what you speak of. But I'm honored to have been here, and I must tell you, the presentation touches my heart. I don't know about you, but I had tears to well in my eyes as I listened to some of the things that were being said. And to Dee, if I may simply say Dee, it seems to me that you have found what the French called your raison d'etre, your reason for being. Not what is your job, but why are you here? You're here for a purpose. And some people discover their purpose, Angela. You're one of those people too, Pastor, brother. And once you discover your raison d'etre, it's not a question of whether you will, you have to. So this is what we have to do. We cannot be the perfect victims. For too long, we've allowed ourselves to be the perfect victims. We don't complain. You were right about my Jewish brothers and sisters, and they know that I say what I'm about to say. They will not tolerate a scintilla of anti-Semitism. Not a scintilla. So we have to decide that we're not going to tolerate racism. If there's a mayor who is perpetrating and perpetuating racism, then that mayor ought not be a mayor. I mean, so, look, I don't want to go through all this, but I want to say that I'm with you. I will send a letter to the Justice Department. You said you want legislation and you don't have it. I'll have my legislative director work with you so that we can put together legislation. This is a cause that we all have cause to be associated with. And I'm going to make sure that I'm associated with it. I thank you for your kind words. I will leave you with this. Carlyle was right. No lie can live forever. William Cullen Bryant was right. Truth crushed to earth shall rise again. Dr. King was right. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But it was C.A. Tinley that gave us the ultimate when he reminded us, harder yet may be the fight. We've come a long way. But harder yet may be the fight. Right may yield to might. Wickedness high may seem to reign. Satan's cause may seem to gain. But there's a God that rules above with a hand of power and a heart of love. And when we are right, that God will help us fight. Harder yet may be the fight.
I know he sure does. Thank you all. It's funny because we started funny with church, but we clearly just had a benediction. So let the church say amen. This is Democracy House. We thank you all for providing a space for truth to be told. Let's give a round of applause to Democracy House. Make sure you support Justice for Greenwood, the Institute. If we can drop those email, or not the email addresses, the website, so that folks can follow, and any other call to action that they have. We appreciate you, Mr. Green. We will follow up. What's the legislative director's name? Bell. Okay, we got it. Yes, sir. We're on it. We have to listen to what he says. I still work there, it feels like. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Do you want to share the website, sir?
JusticeForGreenwood.org. You also have on your chairs postcard you can fill out to go to the DOJ. We also have gift bags. I do want to lift up Lush Cosmetics, who we did in collaboration on Mini Doc and provided the gift bags and supporting this event. Just JusticeForGreenwood.org. You want to?
And tillinstitute.org as well. So you can see all the information about the work we're doing, the programs, and the ability to make a donation as well to the cause. So thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you.
Give it up for Angela Rye. Give it up.
Inspire.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama came to play.
She came to settle the score. I mean, there are a lot of people right now on the Instagram and TikTok timelines who are wondering if this is what Michelle Obama's been holding on to ever since 2016, 2017, when she really had to play the role of the First Lady and be very official. But this is what she really felt about what the Trump family when they came in. And I think she spoke for a lot of Democrats.